I want you to know that I do have a testimony of the gospel. I know that Joseph Smith was a true prophet.
She was just an example of everything.
She prays for every one of her children and grandchildren every night by name.
She is a sincerely, genuinely loving person and takes a great interest in anybody and everybody. She prays every single night for every single great-grandchild and grandchild and her own kids. When I lived with her, I'd hear her prayers, and I just loved hearing those every single night.
This amazing example of womanhood was born Norine Call on March 8, 1921 in Lewiston, Utah. She was born in her grandmother's Emmeline Kent's home, and she was the second of 7 children born to Willard White Call and Sarah Ellen Kent Call.
We had an old house that we lived in, and we did have outside plumbing. We had a long lot, and at the end of that lot there was a little outhouse. But right in our side of our bathroom, of our garage, there was I don't know how to describe it. There's this little space, and there was a toilet in there with a water tank up above, and you'd sit on the toilet seat and the water would fill in the tank up above. And when you got off the toilet seat, it would flush the toilet. So that was our outside bathroom, which was much better than the alternative.
Although simple and rugged, it was a good life, filled with horse-drawn wagon rides to Mount Fort Elementary School in 1927. But many dreams came crashing down with the rise of the Great Depression.
So I was growing up through the 20s, and it was just after World War I, and people were recovering from that, and we were headed toward the Depression, which was in 1929. And I vividly remember the Depression because then I was able to read, and I was reading the newspapers about the breadlines and people who were destitute and having a very hard time. And so, but I always felt secure in my family. My dad always had work, and we always had plenty of food, and my mother was a seamstress, and she canned fruit all summer, so I always had plenty to eat. But I worried about the other people, about the breadlines and the people who just didn't have what we had. I can remember one time, though, I guess it was probably at the height of the Depression, my father was talking to his brother, and he said, "I just don't know how I'm going to do it on $25 a week." And then I worried, and I worried, and I worried, but nothing happened. I still had plenty to eat, plenty to wear, so I decided to quit worrying about that.
And she even indulged in a few luxuries during these difficult times.
We'd go on Saturdays to the nickel 5-cent movies, and you could see a movie for half the day. They'd have a comedy, maybe 2 comedies in the newsreel, and maybe 2 movie features, all for a nickel. So we could, if we had 10 cents, we could buy a candy bar, but we would walk to town and then we would walk back home.
All movies were silent, black and white films.
Colors came when I was probably in junior high. The first colored movies came.
During junior high, she agreed to go live with her widowed neighbor.
There was a lady who lived on our street. We lived on a 2.5-block street, and down towards the corner was Mrs. Meyer, and she was deaf, completely deaf in one ear, and you had to shout in the other, but she was afraid to stay at night. So for many years I stayed down there. I'd get my dishes done at home and my chores done, and then I could go down to Mrs. Meyer's, and I had a room of my own with the bed and a closet and a dresser and an indoor plumbing with the tub. Instead of being in a tin tub, I was in a regular tub. I thought that was really very nice. The thing is, if I wanted to go out on a date, I not only had to ask my parents, I had to ask Mrs. Meyer too.
She earned $5 a month for staying there, and she liked to call it her shoe money.
Left to buy me a pair of shoes at Samuel's.
She graduated from Ogden High in 1939, the year classic movies like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz hit the big screen. She decided in high school to follow her patriarchal blessing and study to become a nurse. She packed 2 skirts, 2 shirts, and 1 dress before heading off to Weber College. In 1940, she landed her first job.
The first job I actually got a decent wage for, which was 12.5 cents an hour, was working at Newberry's at Christmas time in Ogden, Utah.
What
And
year?
I was going to college.
What was the year?
1940.
1940, 12.5 cents
I'd
an
done
hour?
babysitting and stuff like that, but that was the first really job I had that I worked in the counter, the the sandwich counter. And I was not a good worker there. I mostly did dishes, but there was one lady who came in every day and give me her order, and I'd try to get it to her, and I never could get it right. That was bad. But that was the first job I had that was a real paying job.
In 1940, Norine chose Holy Cross Hospital over the LDS hospital to continue her nursing training. She felt Holy Cross was more supportive of women working and getting trained to be nurses.
That's why I ended up at Holy Cross, because I felt welcomed there. But it was a whole new life, because I'd grown up in a very insular place. You know, as far as religion was concerned, I only knew 2 or 3 people who were not LDS. And then I find half our class, we had 32 in our class, and we had about 7 or 8 who were Mormons, a lot of Catholics, and a couple of other religions, and 1 heathen that didn't believe in anything ever. And so it was a whole new life for me to find that other people had religions that they cared for as much as we did. And we decided the very first week we didn't talk religion because we'd end up quarreling. And we also did this sign of the cross before every class. And my dad gave me strict orders on what I could do and what I couldn't.
What'd he tell you?
Told me, for one thing, they had this thing, if you were in the delivery room and a baby was born and was dying, you were supposed to baptize it. And he told me, let someone else baptize them. I didn't have the authority to do it as far as my dad was concerned. Just things like that were pretty basic in their religion, but not in ours.
On December 7th, 1941, Norine's world changed. It was then she realized how greatly her country would be in need of nurses.
It was, of course, on a Sunday, and we got up and went to work, and then all of a sudden people were saying, oh, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and we were all very excited. And I was doubly excited because my one brother was already in the service, and I knew I had 2 more brothers that were right in line. And before I was out of training, my second brother was also in the service. But it was a very exciting day, and we were having capping exercises at the hospital. We'd been in training for a while, and we got our caps, but everyone would know we were seniors when we had our caps. That was a big day for us. So it was a big day on 2 fronts. They had rationing. Everyone lived with their ration book. When we were in training, we had to give our ration books to the hospital so they could get the food and everything. And we were allowed one pair of shoes a year, and they took our shoe things for graduation. We couldn't buy our own shoes. We had to buy white shoes for graduation. It was very interesting, but everyone was involved in the war effort.
In 1942, during the last year of her nursing program, she met a man named Ted Peterson.
I thought he was very handsome, a nice guy. He was very good looking, he was very charismatic.
Ted was the friend of the man she was set up with. She was asked to help find girls for Ted to take out.
I got him 2 or 3 dates, but I didn't get the cutest girls in the class after I met him. And
Ted quickly left to serve a 2-year LDS mission in the Central States.
by the time he came home from his mission, I told my mother that's probably who I was going to marry. I guess I was already partially in love with him through the letters and everything. But we went to dances and shows and things like that. And I never did meet his friend. Everyone was in the service, you know. And so I didn't meet his friends until basically the war was over.
They became engaged in 1943, but Ted enlisted in the Navy and the war was intensifying. Ted was leaving and there became a great need for nurses. Norine called off their engagement.
My dad thought he had an old maid on his hands. Poor Dad. Someone that I dated before I went in the Army married some girl in our ward, and Dad said, "That's another one you let get away."
Instead of becoming a Mrs., Norine went into the service, first working at the Ogden Arsenal before taking off to Fort Lewis for basic training.
I thought it was cool that she was an Army nurse.
My mother wore Army boots.
Her first station was in Palm Springs, California.
She would always talk about how in the war she was a minority as a woman, and so oftentimes she told us about one time when she had 3 dates in one night and how she had to try and scurry them in and out, and that they would drop her off at the door and then the next one would be waiting in the reception room, and she would go out with them. And we kind of would give her a hard time about how she was maybe a little bit of a player, but it wasn't that at all. It was, she kind of felt like, well, there were so few of us, and I just I wanted to just be there for them and have an enjoyable time with them and make sure they were having an enjoyable time. And so, but we always loved to hear stories about that. Whenever she'd tell us things and we'd be kind of shocked and be like, "Grandma," she would say, "It was the war, it was the war."
You'd go to the back door and you'd take kiss and goodnight, and they'd go home and you'd go in the house and the next one was there.
Surprisingly, Norine remained unattached, making her available for her real love, Ted. They reunited after the war, and he asked her again to be his wife.
I was working in Ogden and working the afternoon shift, and I got off at midnight. Ted picked me up and he gave me a great big heart-shaped box of chocolates. And I thanked him, all the proper things. And then he said, "Well, aren't you going to take one?" And I headed for one, and he said, "No, take that one that has the gold wrap on it." So I got that, and when I opened it up, there was a box of my diamond in it.
They married on May 22nd, 1947 in the Salt Lake LDS Temple, when Norine was 26 years old. She wore a $75 wedding dress that she told her mother only cost her $35. Norine worked at the VA hospital while Ted continued to go to school. 2 years into their marriage, their first daughter, Vicky, was born.
I remember her making custard pudding for people that were sick. I remember my dad's mom coming over on Saturday nights, and Mom would do pin curls in her hair with beer. I wasn't quite sure about the beer part, but supposedly that makes a tighter pin curl, and this was with little curls with bobby pins she'd do all over my grandma's head. I remember her getting together with the neighborhood ladies they made little surprise balls. You'd start with a little prize, wrap crepe paper, put another little prize in, wrap them until they were about like this, and then decorate them like elves. It was a Christmas party for our neighborhood kids. And
She took her fun, spirited ways with her family to California. Her son Ralph was born in the Navy hospital in 1951.
I think when I climbed up in her lap and she sang to me, I'd been hurt somehow. I don't remember what it was, but I think that's what it was. And it's just that was Mom, and I just felt safe. Mm-hmm. And I always did feel safe with Mom.
Norine continued working as a nurse.
I didn't choose to. It was kind of a necessity at the time because we were okay while Ted was in the service, but when he came out, he got a job. We wanted to buy a home, and we lived with his parents until we could get into our own home. And we had to borrow money for the down payment for that. and Ted was just getting started selling, and so it was just really necessary that I work.
She worked a lot of times when women didn't work, and she had to. One of the things that was kind of interesting is that she never worked full-time, because if she had done that, she would have been making more than my dad, and she didn't want to make him feel bad, so she would only work part-time.
Norine quit nursing when she gave birth to her last baby, Jan, on May 1st, 1958.
I was the one that was with her when she was driving, and it was a little scary at times. There was one time when we went the wrong way on the one-way. It was either 4th or 5th South. I don't remember which one, but we went the wrong way on that, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of headlights coming to us, and we had to hurry and get out of that one. There was another time when we came up, and they had just painted the crosswalk, and so there were little flags, and so she pulled up right up to the little flags, and the guys are all still there painting, just looking at her, and she said, "Janny, can you go and move those flags so that I can make a right turn here?" I said, "Mom, you can't do that. They just painted it. That's why the flags are there." And she was very upset with me. I remember she would rock me in the gold rocker in the living room whenever I was sad or hurt or tired, and sing to me the Nanny's song, which is, of course, now not coming to my mind, but she would sing to me in the rocker when I was just 2 or 3. I remember that, and I honestly think that she did that to all of us, and that's why we all love music so much.
She would sing as she did her housework. She'd be vacuuming and she'd be singing. She'd be dusting and she'd be singing. She'd be doing the dishes and she'd be singing.
I love to sing anything, but I can't sing anymore. That's one of my great sorrows, that I can't belt out a song when I want to, especially church songs.
When she wasn't singing, Norine was busy making friends, making people feel like they mattered to her.
You can't have friends unless you are a friend.
She's just this combination of compassion and friendship. She never forgets one of our birthdays. We always have a card in the mail if she can't be there with us. And but yet she's also very practical, down to earth, smart, interesting, and fun. And I think that that's what makes her special.
I feel like I'm her friend as much as her grandson.
I was dating my husband the whole time that I lived with her, basically. And so every night we would come home back to my grandma's house and just sit with grandma and watch basketball or watch football, and she was always up on the sports and would talk to my now husband the entire time about who was playing and what she thought about the game. And
Grandma's very compassionate and she's very friendly. I had the opportunity to live with her for about 5 years, and the few girls I brought by home, there were just a few, she was always very interested in them and wanting to get to know them, and they would always mention to me how welcomed they feel and how they liked that, about Grandma, and just that she was so compassionate and so loving and so friendly.
I've been very fortunate. I've always had really good friends no matter where I've gone.
And this spunky lady was the right person to start a study group with her friends in Salt Lake City, Utah, that has lasted for decades.
The church had an edict. They wanted everyone to have study groups in their ward. And so these study groups that we had were, the women we worked together in the primary and Sunday school, and the men were priesthood leaders together. And we had this group of 11 couples, and for over 50 years, actually be about 60. How old's Janny? Anyway, that's how many years we were friends, really, and we watched each other's families grow up, and we had sadness, and we had happiness, and tragedies, and they just feel special. There are only 4 of us left now out of 22. And I'm not there, so that leaves 3 of them. But we just lost 3 this last year. That's been hard. The hardest part. First we talked about the church, then we talked about our kids, then we talked about our grandkids, then we talked about our doctor's appointments. Then you go to the funerals. It's just a progression. The last 10 or 15 years, it's been different and difficult, some of it.
Her life hasn't been without its difficulty. She lost her eternal companion Ted in March of 1981.
While I was living with Grandma, there's this funny trick that Grandma had. She knew where everything was in her house. She'd send you to look for something, and she'd say, go back here. It's in this closet on this shelf behind these boxes, and look in this sack, and there would be something. She had a brain like a squirrel. They say squirrels can remember 800 acorns or whatever. Grandma could remember everything. And one thing I thought was super interesting to me, Grandpa went in the hospital with a heart attack, and he had left his pants that he was wearing. He had some Levi's, and he left them hanging on a hook in the closet, and Grandma didn't touch those pants for 26 years. They just hung in the closet forever. And there would be times when I would be helping Grandma clean stuff or do stuff, and I'd always ask her, and she'd say, just leave them hanging there.
I just grew to love her for her courage and her determination and her stick-to-itiveness. There was one time that just shortly after he died that the basement flooded. And we were so ticked off at him that he left us with this flooding basement. We were both just mad together. And she's just my hero.
And she came to the aid of many grandchildren by opening her home to those who lived with her.
She's always a very welcoming person.
They all bring me joy, and I have a lot of joy.
And she gave them each a special name.
She has touched so many of our lives, and I don't know a woman that is so loved by so many and reaches across so many generations, from old to young. She, you know, when each of us were born, her grandkids, she gave each of us our own nicknames. Each of us have a nickname from Grandma.
She's always been my precious pet.
I think that was her way of letting us know that we, each one of us, were really important to her and special.
I always tell people I'm Grandma's favorite, and I think what makes Grandma special is every one of her grandkids feels that way. She has the ability to make every grandkid feel like they are her favorite, like they're special, and like they're important to her, and she has always been there. I don't think there's a single important event in my life that occurred without my grandma present. Right before I went on my mission, Grandma came to the temple with me the first time I went through the temple. And I'm not a big picture person. I don't have very many pictures in my house. My wife feels differently, but I don't. And one of the only pictures I keep is a picture of me and Grandma outside the temple that day. For me, going on a mission was a pretty big deal, and for Grandma to be there and share that with me, and it was sort of the culmination of everything I'd gone through growing up. So for her to be there and share that moment with me was super special for me.
I just love my mom.
One thing I always looked forward to was changing of the century, and I made that. I always figured I was a 40s woman.
Why?
Because that's when I graduated from training and I went in the service, and that's the year I got married, and that's the year I had Vicky. And, you know, I was a 40s, and I loved the music and the movies that they made then. So I always figured I was a 40s woman.
Her secret for living a long life?
I did love Diet Pepsi, and I was very happy when they said that was okay. And I think living your religion helped. I didn't have any particular bad habits, so I think that helped. Marrying the right guy to start with, I guess, is the most. And we had the same values, and that makes a lot of difference, I think. And we always had the same goals for ourselves and our children.
We just always knew that we were loved by her.
Mom would always say, wait till Dad got home, and so she could be the loving one, and Dad was the disciplinarian.
I've always been really proud of Grandma. I think one of the things for me that was cool was her experience with the war. That was something that, it was a generational thing, obviously, with a lot of people. I think for her, it meant a lot. She was super close with her brothers. I was always impressed with how close she was with her brothers. She always was very proud of them and very fond of them, and I think part of the reason was the shared experience of going through the war. She was brave, she was smart, she was educated, she worked hard, she worked outside the home at a time when a lot of people didn't work outside the home. At the same time, she was still, you know, very feminine. I think she told me she didn't wear pants until she was in her late 50s. She didn't learn to drive till she was in her 50s, so she fit a lot of the stereotypes of the time, but she was still very brave, I think kind of forward thinking, and she always had a certain kind of calm around her. I think partly because of the experiences that she'd been through. There wasn't a lot that ever got her really rattled. I mean, she ran out of Diet Pepsi that'd get her, but other than that, she had this way of just being calm and letting things roll off of her back. She was always happy. she's always positive, and I was always really proud that she's my grandma.
She is a sincerely, genuinely loving person.
I was born just a couple hours after her birthday, so we've celebrated our birthdays together for as long as I can remember, and that has always been special to me. She always kind of teased me about how I was special to her, but that I needed to have my own birthday because I was independent just like her.
And this independent, self-made nurse, daughter, mother, grandmother wants her family to know what's mattered to her.
Well, I want them all to know that first, I love them very dearly, every one of them, but I also have a testimony that I want them to know, that I do have a testimony of the gospel and the truthfulness of it, and if you live and do the things that you can, that you're asked to do, your life will be much happier, and you'll make your friendships there too. So I just want them to know that, to stay close to the church and to their families. I want you to know that I do have a testimony of the gospel. I know that Joseph Smith was a true prophet.
We were going to go down and visit her, and we were setting up a schedule, telling her we were going to come down, and she's 92 years old. We said, we're going to come down, and she says, well, you can't come on Wednesday. We said, why not? She says, because I'm doing my visiting teaching. So at 92 years old, she's still going out and doing her church job. Yeah, she loved God.
And each night she gets down on her knees to talk to him.
Just to see her when she was still, in her 80s, early 90s, and she would still just get down, kneel down, pray out loud. I loved it.
If you can hear her pray, she prays for people individually. And she will pray about things that are going on in their lives and ask for blessings for each one. And my sister once overheard her just not very long ago, and just kind of recorded a few of the things that she's heard were being said, and I was touched to hear that my name was in her prayer and was among those that she was asking blessings for. But it was a long list, and it would just go on, and I think that for me it's also her testimony of Jesus Christ, and just of the plan of happiness and families, and that each of us have individual worth.
She just has an amazing love and concern for all of us.
I just want you to know that I love every one of you. I love all these beautiful children and my handsome grandsons and beautiful granddaughters. It's like you've all been a joy in my life, and I want you to know that. And I'd like to just say these things to you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.